This is the Seven Figure Standard Podcast, hosted by Arash Vossoughi and Mikey Stiller, with mindset and strategies to help you break through and create personal freedom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Seven Figure Standard Podcast. I'm Mikey Stiller, joined by my co-host, Arash Vossoughi, and we are so happy to be with you this week for a new episode. Before we get started, Arash, how are you?
I'm great, Mikey. How are you?
I am doing great as well. I'm excited to get into today's topic, mostly because we have so many new listeners that I think it's really going to benefit our new listeners as well as our more seasoned listeners. So what I thought we could do today is share your full story, your personal story, and the biggest catalyst that led to your transformation.
So I, like many people, was working at creating a better life for many years. I read hundreds of books. I probably read in a 3-year period, more than 200 books, and anything I could get my hands on, I was doing. And I was in the corporate world at the time, and my results were not changing. Nothing was changing. In fact, they were getting worse. Is what was happening because I was so much more dissatisfied. So I couldn't figure out the combination, and it was driving me crazy. It was literally driving me crazy. And I always had this idea that it has to work. If it's worked for so many people, it has to work for me. Why isn't it working? And I would tell you, I was from the motto at that time that I was working a lot harder. And then a pivotal moment in my life happened. This was the catalyst to all my change. And 3 weeks prior to my wedding, the company I was working with sold. But what was interesting about this, there was rumors that the company was selling. And I worked my way at this company from the bottom to the top. The guy who hired me, I ended up becoming his manager. I was vice president of sales. I talked to the president, and I said, there's rumors that you guys are selling. Is that true? And he said, you'd be one of the first to know if we were selling. That's not true. The very next day I came into work, they sold. And I was walking out to my car, and I was so angry. And then I had this voice that said, if you're angry at anyone, be angry at yourself. And that was the moment I had a very philosophical change with myself. That was the moment. I always say that I was taking the walk of shame to the car because I didn't know what I was going to do. The new company ended up wanting to keep me, and they tried hard to keep me, but I said no. And that's what I mean. I had a philosophical change. Before I understood standard, I drew a line in the sand, and I chose the life that I really wanted to create more than comfort. Now, I would be lying to you if I said I knew it was going to happen, because for 3 years it didn't happen. But at that moment, I think I had 5 things that really changed when I really look at it. The first was I took 100% ownership of my role in this. It was my responsibility. And at that moment, I started making no more excuses. But no one was coming to save me, and I knew that. My life was a mess because of me. The only thing I had going positively in my life were my friends and my relationship with my wife. Well, she wasn't my wife then, but at that point, my fiance. But I had patterns that I had to change. And I had to look at what were the patterns that led me to failure. One of them was comfort. When I used to say, when I have this side hustle that I get to this point, then I'll leave. And I didn't have very big goals. At that time I was earning $110,000 in a year, which I thought was good. But that was a very weak standard. At that moment, I raised my standards for everything. I remember I was at my wedding, and all my family was worried about me. And I don't think it's an ideal way to start your life with your partner not having a job. And I remember my wife said to me, She goes, are we going to be okay? And I said, yeah, we're going to be better than okay. Now, I don't know. I think it was all those years of training that I had that mindset that everything was going to be okay. Because if you looked at my bank account, I had a foreclosure sticker on my garage a month earlier. It was super embarrassing. Like I was going in the wrong direction. But when I changed my philosophy that it was my mess that I had to clean it up, that's when everything changed. And like I said, I raised my standards that I said no to comfort because I could have got another six-figure job the next day. I got it offered and I said no to it. But what I realized were my goals were useless without high standards. They were absolutely useless. And then I started setting my non-negotiables. I really was up against it. And I was so dissatisfied because the only thing that I wanted, and this drove me when I left, was I wanted to create freedom. But the interesting thing is when I lost my job, the next day, I never felt more free. But if you looked at my bank account, that's why I always tell people freedom is not your bank account. You cannot create financial freedom until you're emotionally free. I had never felt more free, but things started working in my favor because I bet on myself instead of betting on comfort. The next thing, the very next day, I got introduced to the person who had the greatest impact on me in my life, which was Bob Proctor. And we had a mutual acquaintance, and Bob talked to me and he said, I can really help you. And in my mind, I didn't even know he did coaching at that time. Like coaching wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And I used to read books that said, find a coach and do exactly, or a mentor and do exactly what they tell you to do. And I was searching, I could never find anybody, but he said, if you will do exactly what I tell you to do, and you don't need to believe it, but I believe I can show you how, I will show you how to change your life. And at that moment, I didn't know what this was going to cost. To me, he told me what it cost. To me, it felt like millions. I was already $150,000 in debt with a foreclosure sticker on my garage without a job. And then I leveraged whatever credit I had left. And whatever I didn't have, I asked my mom to lend me some money to do it, which was super embarrassing in its own right. So I'll give you an idea where I was. But I invested in growth instead of staying comfortable. And I said to myself, I'm going to do exactly what this man tells me to do. But I told Bob, I was very honest with him. I said, I've never done exactly what anyone's told me to do. I said, I was a great starter and a terrible finisher. And he said, because you don't have the proper direction and you don't have the right accountability. And he said, accountability is a success insurance policy. But he said, and I'll say it again, because this is what changed it for me. These are the patterns that I started changing. But when I invested in a mentor, I invested in his belief. Now, we used to talk. I said, why did you believe in me? And he said, because I understand what you didn't understand. I was 50 years ahead of you, and I used to be you. And so at that time, he said, there's one habit that you have to do, which I teach all our clients, is do it now. So everything I started doing, I did it right away. And within 30 days, all of a sudden, I created an income of $10,000 a month. Now, I was doing a lot of side things before I found my purpose. Like whatever I could do, I did. And I mastered execution. I mastered action, but I wouldn't say I was a polished product at all at that time. But I was now mixing all the mindset that I had learned on my own, then learned with Bob, and then I did it right away. If he told me to do something, I did it right away. My courage muscle increased dramatically. My confidence changed immensely. Within 3 months, I was earning $20,000 to $25,000 a month. That was like $1 million to me at that time. I couldn't believe what was going on. But I stopped doing so many things. I just started doing a few things in a great way. But what the greatest thing that I did none of this would have happened if I didn't take ownership and until I decided. And that's why I always talk about decision, because until you make up your mind you're going to do something, you're not going to do it. A lot of people are plateaued because they don't make up their mind. I was the same way. And they're constantly negotiating with themselves. When this happens, then I'll do that. Well, I knocked that off. I completely went out of my comfort zone every day. Within a year, I wiped out $150,000 in debt and earned $282,000 in positive income after I got rid of the debt. Within a couple years, I was earning my first million. And I remember Bob said to me, he said, "You need to do this with me." He said, "I see something in you that somebody saw in me." And at this point, I had so much confidence compared to who I was. And over the last 18 years, I've dedicated my life to doing this. And we're so good at what we do. And I don't say that because of me. I say it measuring our clients' results. Just this morning, I got a call from a client. Trevor sent me not a call. He sent me a text message and he said, "I want to thank you for the mentorship. I just had my first $25,000 month." See, for me, that's a huge deal because I remember when I had my first $25,000 month. I know exactly what he's feeling. And what I responded to him after congratulating him is, "Let's go. This is just the start." Because once I started doing it, I said, at the time I thought, once I get to here, then I'm good. But then I started thinking, let's push the limits. How far can you go? Somebody asked me a question last week, and I thought about it. They said, if you were to do this again, what would you do differently? The one thing I would have done differently is I would have dreamed even bigger. I would have had bigger goals, bigger standards. That's what I would have done differently. Because once I kept betting on myself, at every year that went by, everything exponentially got better. Now, I share this because our listeners have patterns that are holding them stuck just like I did. But the key ones that they have to change, and I can tell you this explicitly, until you take ownership and make up your mind, this is how I'm going to live, you're not going to live any differently. And you've got to get rid of the excuses. The second thing is you have to raise your standards. You have to raise your standards. You cannot screw around with your standards. Standards always wins. Standards is the most closely related thing to income. If you want to raise your income, you have to stop tolerating less. You have to raise your standards. And then you've got to invest in your growth. You've got to leverage other people's specialized knowledge who really know what the hell they're talking about, and not just know, but they perform the results that you want to get, and you want to do exactly what they tell you to do. And then knowledge is nothing without execution. You have to execute. Like my non-negotiable back then, when I was very unaware, when I started making changes to just today, I am executing my 3 non-negotiable wins for the day from my goal. And I did that back then when my back was against the wall. And I will not go to sleep until those 3 wins are happening. I will not negotiate with myself. But these are do it now activities. These are verbs. These are not, I'm just going to do my morning routine. That's not the deal. The morning routine is like brushing your teeth. Your processes are to build your standards and identity. Your action is the most important thing you're going to do. But just focus on a few great actions every day. And every day, even if they're the same actions, do them so much better than you do them the day before. That's what I did. And that's where all of a sudden, I've mentored people in over 100 countries. When we started our business, we went from nothing to creating an 8-figure business. And I walked away from multiple 7 figures to bet on myself again. This works every single time. But too many people are not faithful to their standards. They're not faithful to their goal. They're faithful to comfort. They're faithful to the present results. And I always tell anybody this, and I mean it so authentically. I know they can do so much greater because I know I was where a lot of people were, and if I can do it, they could do it. There's people right now who are earning $500,000 who are struggling. They've been doing that same baseline over and over and over again. They're no different than the person earning $20,000 a year struggling because their soul wants to do better, but they have to change. And it's not about grinding your way to success. It's not about grinding your way. I don't care what time anyone wakes up. Wake up whenever you want, but during your day, you can't keep giving into the days. You have to have great work ethic. You have to build great character. You have to have great work habits. You have to set great boundaries. And you have to draw a line in the sand of what you're no longer going to tolerate. And that's why I always talk about standards, because your income will never exceed your standards, ever. Your financial reality is an exact reflection of what you're willing to accept. If you want to earn more, stop chasing money and start raising your standards and start demanding more from yourself. Everyone, Mike, has unlimited potential. But you don't get paid on potential. You get paid on standards. Plenty of people are capable of making 6, 7, 8 figures, but they don't because their standard is procrastination. Their standard is inconsistency. And their standard is low effort work. Well, procrastination, inconsistency, and low effort work was who I used to be. I can tell you that. It was who I used to be. But what was that aligned with? Low income habits. So that's what I changed. I changed my pattern of behaviors that led me to failure to my patterns of behaviors that led me to success. And I've never stopped doing it. Like, I am hungrier now than I've ever been. But like our podcast is called the 7-Figure Standard Podcast because standard changed my life. But success is never about luck. It's never about talent, and it's never about how smart you are. There's a lot of people who have all these degrees who don't do very well. And there's people who didn't even graduate high school who are creating 7, 8, 9 figures. But it's about the standards you set, the actions you take. And if you're stuck right now, don't wait for the right time. Draw a line in the sand, raise your standards, execute relentlessly, and watch how fast your life changes, because it did for me. And that's what I want to keep showing people how to do.
This was absolutely fantastic. I want to ask you a question. So go back to the very beginning. You said over a 3-year period, you probably consumed 200-300 books. And then fast forward to the end of that 3 years, within 3 months, you got mentorship, you were doing it now, and all of a sudden your results were multiplying extremely fast. What was the difference in that? Was it the mentorship? Was it you were just sick and tired enough to do something different?
It was, I didn't have a choice to stay in comfort. If I stayed and had the same attitude towards what I was doing, I had no urgency. I had zero urgency. My actions were very weak actions. I knew about this philosophy. I didn't live it. Well, in that moment, when I lost my job and I walked away from the job, I didn't take the other offer. I operated so differently. That's why whenever I say you have to be willing to fail at your future self than succeed at your current self, that's exactly what I did. So it's not even comparable. The two people were very, very different. It was like I had a metamorphosis in that moment that I was walking to the car. I was making excuses. How could they do this? How could they lie to me? And then I had this voice. To this day, I think it was God talking to me. It was God's voice tapped me on the shoulder and said, stop blaming them, start taking responsibility. And it changed my life. But they were two very different people. There's a lot of people who just want to gather information. They want to gather information. And then there's the person who only wants transformation. I went from gathering information to transformation. I was talking to somebody last week and they were telling me all these books they read. Then I said, well, what is your goal? They told me, I said, I think the goal is too small. He goes, no, that would put too much pressure. You might as well stop reading those books. They're doing nothing for you. See, that's what I did. I kept gathering information. The information is useless without execution. And I can understand it. I was just sitting there listening to this because I was at a party when this was happening, and I was just listening to this conversation, and I'm like, boy, oh boy. I'm going to talk to this person. They're going to be in the same spot. I already know it. It's not about how much knowledge you have. It's about what you do with the knowledge. The ideas only work if we work the ideas. And the number one thing we have to do is nothing's going to change until we make up our mind. This is exactly what I'm going to do. This is exactly what I'm going to create. I want everyone to make up their mind and stop screwing around with their life. I want you to go after what you really want, not what you think you can achieve. But remember, don't set your goals because I'm saying it. Don't set your standards because I'm saying it. Do it because you really want to do it. Because it doesn't matter if somebody has a big goal, but they're not committed to it. If you're not committed to it, you're never going to achieve it.
Arash, you've given so much. You've actually given action steps throughout this entire episode. But what I want to ask you is, if someone's listening to this right now, no matter what level they are at, no matter where they're at on their journey, but they want more, they want transformation, what is your takeaway or action step for them today?
It's kind of what I said. Nothing happens until you truly decide. And then you're going to know you truly decided because I want you to take an action that is aligned with what you truly decided. I want you to do it right away. Like say, I decided I'm going to double my income. I'm going to quadruple my income. Then I want you to take an action. Send me your commitment. Send it to our email at hello@VossCoachingCo. Let me help you be accountable. You know, accountability is such a big thing. Like accountability changed my life. Now I don't need accountability from anyone. But at the time I did. And a lot of people don't have accountability and they dip. And so that's what I recommend. But Mike, we got to go through standards much deeper on the podcast because it's in my mind right now because I'm thinking, God, how much it changed my life and how many people misunderstand. They think goals and standards are the same. They're very different. But I want everyone to be, do, and have exactly what they want to be, do, and have. But until you make a decision, nothing's going to change. And there is no more power in all the icons that you respect than there is in you. Yeah, people think they could do it, but I can't. No, trust me, they had to overcome adversity, but you have that same power inside of you. Instead of focusing on why you can't, I want you to burn your mind on only why you can. And that's going to change the game.
So good. Thank you, Arash, for sharing your story and so many great takeaways. Thanks to all of you for listening. And if you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and leave us a rating and review. And most importantly, share this with your friends and family, whether that's personally or through social media. And we'll see you next week for another episode of the 7-Figure Standard podcast. And as a teaser, it is going to be on Standard. So thanks, Arash, and thanks to all of you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of 7-Figure Standard. We hope you found the insights and strategies helpful on your journey to success. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform to help us reach more people like you. To learn more about Arash and Mikey and how Voss Coaching Co. can help you achieve your goals and reach new levels of success, visit VossCoachingCo.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of 7-Figure Standard.